You were never meant to carry the world on your shoulders. You were never asked by life to grip so tightly, to brace against every tide, to fight the river as it flowed, all in the name of survival. Somewhere along the path, you were taught that control was strength, that struggle was noble, and that surrender meant giving up. But today, I invite you to awaken to a deeper truth that real strength begins the moment you release your need to control everything. Surrender is not a white flag waving in the wind. It is not weakness clothed in spiritual language. Surrender is the opening of the soul's hands, unclenching from illusion, and finally allowing what already is. It is the courage to stop arguing with reality. It is the power of stepping aside so the universe can step in. Look at nature. The ocean does not resist the moon. The tree does not strive to make the seasons change. The sun does not apologize for shining. They each exist in effortless cooperation with something greater. Not passively, not indifferently, but in a sacred surrender to the divine intelligence that breathes all things into being. What if your life was never about conquering, but about remembering how to align? What if your power wasn't in force, but in flow? We've been conditioned to believe that surrender is synonymous with failure, that letting go means we've lost. But the ego only knows two settings: control or collapse. It cannot comprehend the grace that lives in the middle. The soul, however, knows a different language. It knows that surrender is the portal. It is the hinge that opens the door to peace, to wisdom, to healing. When you stop trying to fix the moment, you begin to feel it. And when you feel it without resistance, you start to be transformed by it. You were not born to suffer beneath the weight of your own expectations. You were born to fly freely in the sky of trust. And yet, so many walk through life, armored in tension, constantly fighting what is. Fighting their past, their parents, their partners, their pain. They wear spiritual armor, trying to protect themselves from life, all while missing it. But freedom does not come from resistance. Freedom comes from meeting life as it is raw, unfiltered, uncertain, but always sacred. Surrender is not the end of your power, it's the beginning of your real power. The power that doesn't dominate, but liberates. The power that doesn't control, but creates. It is the power that arises when you no longer believe you have to be the source of everything. There is a force in this universe that spins the planets, grows the flowers, and whispers to the caterpillar when it's time to become a butterfly. This same force lives in you, but it cannot work through clenched fists and closed hearts. It moves when you move aside. It heals when you release your grip. The irony is you never had control to begin with. The idea that you did was the illusion. You cannot control people. You cannot control time. You cannot control outcomes. You can only control your willingness to surrender into love, into presence, into peace. And peace doesn't come when everything is resolved. Peace comes when you resolve to stop resisting what is. Surrender is not about passive submission. It's about active trust. It's not about giving up. It's about giving over. Giving your worries back to the universe. Giving your attachment to outcomes back to God. Giving your burdens to something larger, wiser, more loving than your fearful mind. The great spiritual teachers all spoke this truth. Jesus said, "Not my will, but thine be done." Lao Tzu taught that yielding overcomes the hard. Rumi whispered, "Try to be like a tree, let the dead leaves drop." These weren't invitations to give up, they were calls to wake up. Wake up from the illusion of control and step into the mystery of grace. The ego hates surrender because it fears death. But the soul loves surrender because it knows that's where rebirth happens. Imagine standing in the middle of a great river, trying to hold back the current. You push, you strain, you shout, and still the river moves on. You exhaust yourself trying to dam the infinite. Until one day you realize, what if the river is not your enemy? What if it's your deliverance? So you let go. And in that sacred release, you are carried, not away from yourself, but back home to yourself, to the you that is already whole, to the you that has always been enough, to the you that never needed to force what was already unfolding. Surrender is how the wound becomes the womb. It's how endings become openings. It's how breakdown becomes breakthrough. It is not an act of collapse, but of cooperation with what is holy. When you stop clinging to your pain can begin to heal. When you stop needing people to be different, you start to see them through the eyes of compassion. When you stop demanding that life match your script, you begin to read the script. Life has been lovingly handing you all along. To surrender is to see with new eyes. You begin to realize that the things you thought were problems were really invitations, that the detours were actually directions, that the closed doors were actually protection. Surrender gives you the clarity to see that life has always been happening for you, not to you. This doesn't mean you abandon your dreams. It means you stop worshiping your preferences. You stop believing that your happiness depends on the outcome. You start dancing with life rather than dragging it behind you. The surrendered soul still dreams, but they let go of how it must happen. They still desire, but they trust in divine timing. They still act, but without the desperation of the ego's agenda. They live in harmony, not in fear. And here is the paradox of surrender. The more you let go, the more you receive. The more you release control, the more peace flows in. The more you stop striving, the more grace arrives. Because grace is not earned, it is allowed. It is not a reward, it is a river that's always flowing. But you cannot feel its flow while you are clutching to the rocks of resistance. You must let go. And in that letting go, you will not fall, you will float. You are not here to suffer under the illusion of control. You are here to remember the truth, that there's a rhythm to this universe, and your soul already knows the dance. You only need to surrender to the music. Not because you're weak, but because you're wise enough to know that love is a better master than fear. Let your heart break open. Let your plans dissolve if they must. Let the healing begin where the holding stops. There is nothing more courageous than a soul who chooses surrender, not because they've given up, but because they've woken up. You cannot force the flower to bloom. You can only create the conditions for blooming and then let it happen in its own divine time. So it is with your joy, your purpose, your healing. You prepare your heart and then you let go. You stop pushing the river and you allow yourself to be carried. You are not the one holding the stars in place, nor do you cause the tides to roll in and out. And yet, isn't it strange how often we try to control the rhythm of life as if the entire universe hinges on our will? But control is a false security. It is the prison we construct when trust feels too vulnerable. And the bars are made of expectations, hard, sharp, unyielding. Every moment we cling to should, must, can't, or never, we're reinforcing a world built not on presence, but on fear. Yet the soul lives on trust. Not a blind, naive trust, but a deep, intuitive knowing that life is intelligent, that the same force that turns an acorn into an oak knows how to turn your pain into wisdom. When you surrender, you are not falling behind. You are catching up with your destiny. You are stepping out of the storm of the mind and into the calm of your being. You are saying, I trust the path, even when I cannot see the next step. That is not weakness, that is power. That is not foolishness, that is faith. Have you ever noticed the most beautiful moments of your life came unplanned? The laughter you didn't expect, the connection that arrived like a gift, the healing that happened not when you tried, but when you stopped trying. The universe has a rhythm, and it does not follow the clock on your wall or the calendar on your phone. It beats in stillness. It speaks in silence. It moves in its own mysterious, divine timing. And surrender is how you sync with it. The ego will always offer you ultimatums, fight or fail, control or collapse. But there is a third way, the way of surrender. It is the way of the Tao, the path of least resistance. It is not passive. It is participatory. You are not abandoning life. You are cooperating with it. You stop saying, why is this happening to me? And start asking, what is this trying to show me? Because everything that enters your life comes bearing a message, not as punishment, not as cruelty, but as invitation. Every heartbreak is an invitation to open wider. Every delay is an invitation to trust deeper. Every loss is an invitation to love what remains. And when you stop trying to manage the message, you can begin to receive it. Do not underestimate the strength it takes to surrender. It takes courage to stop swimming upstream. It takes boldness to trust what you cannot see. But in that surrender, your energy returns. Your peace returns. And you begin to discover you were never meant to figure it all out. You were meant to remember that you are not alone in this. There is a current to this life, and it knows exactly where you're meant to go. So many people spend their lives chasing outcomes, running, fixing, striving, reaching, all in the name of some distant peace that always seems just beyond the next accomplishment. But peace is not something you earn, it is something you allow. It is not a goal. It is the natural state that arises when you no longer resist this moment. You stop seeking, you start seeing, you stop controlling, you start receiving, you stop forcing, you start flowing, and you realize that surrender isn't something you do once, it's something you practice every day. Every morning you rise and say, I release what I cannot control. I trust what I cannot see. I allow what wants to come through me. That is not passivity. That is the most powerful declaration of alignment you can make. You don't need to bend life to your will. You only need to align your will with life. This shift from control to cooperation is where everything begins to change. Not necessarily on the outside, but on the inside. The battles in your mind begin to quiet. The arguments you keep having with reality start to dissolve. The tension that sits behind your eyes, in your neck, in your chest begins to soften. And in that softness, you begin to remember who you really are. Not the stressed mind, not the desperate planner, not the hardened identity. You are the spacious awareness beneath all that. You are the stillness that watches it all come and go. You are the open sky, not the weather passing through it. And surrender is how the sky remembers itself. When you stop identifying with the storm no longer defines you. When you stop believing every fearful thought, those thoughts lose their grip. When you stop resisting the waves, you begin to surf. And isn't that the art of life? Not drowning in the waves, not stopping the waves, but learning to surf the divine ocean of change with grace, humor, and trust. The ego fears change. The soul knows that change is the only way truth reveals itself. So stop bracing for impact, start leaning into flow. If your plans are falling apart, it's because something better is coming together. If your path is unclear, it's because you're being invited to trust. If everything you once clung to is slipping away, it's because you're being asked to hold something higher, something eternal, something unshakable. And what is more unshakable than a soul at peace? That kind of peace cannot be faked. It cannot be found in possessions and status and achievements. It only arises when you finally stop trying to manipulate your way into a perfect life and instead welcome the perfectly imperfect life you already have. Because that life, messy, raw, sacred, and unfolding, is the only place where grace can meet you. The moment you stop needing things to change in order to be okay, you've entered the realm of true power. The moment you release your grip on how things should be, you become available for how beautifully they can be. The moment you surrender, you are no longer living in resistance. You are living in resonance. That is the difference between effort and ease, between anxiety and awareness, between exhaustion and embodiment. This is not about sitting still and doing nothing. This is about sitting still and doing the inner work of releasing your attachment to control. Then and only then do you rise to act from clarity, not fear. From love, not lack. From wisdom, not worry. You move not because you're afraid to fall behind, but because your soul is moved to act. This is the paradox of surrender. It does not stop your motion. It sanctifies it. You begin to live from inspiration rather than desperation. You become a vessel rather than a victim. You flow with divine energy rather than fighting it. And that is what it means to live as a spiritual being, having a human experience. You remember that you are not the doer of all things. You are the expression of something greater. You are the melody, not the musician. The light, not the lamp. Surrender is the art of remembering. I don't have to carry this alone. The mind will scream, but what if it doesn't work out? And the heart, in its soft strength, will whisper back, what if it works out better than I imagined? Surrender is learning to trust the whisper more than the scream. It is choosing the still voice within over the noisy voice without. It is the sacred shift from fear to faith, from demanding life conform to your timeline, to allowing life to unfold in divine time. Surrender is not the end of desire. It is the purification of it. It is not that you no longer wish, dream, or move, but that you do so without clutching. You do so with open hands and a soft gaze. You plant seeds, not because you're desperate for harvest, but because you're honoring the natural rhythm of creation. You water, you wait, you trust, and even if nothing sprouts in the way you expected, you trust that the earth is still working, that something is shifting below the surface. That growth doesn't always announce itself with fireworks. Sometimes it's a quiet stretch in the dark, a subtle rearrangement of roots, an invisible awakening. The ego cannot comprehend this kind of subtle power, but the soul was made for it. The soul is not impatient. The soul knows that real transformation often happens in the spaces between, in the pauses, in the surrender. When you stop doing, pushing, demanding, and instead fall into being, that's where the alchemy begins. Do you remember what it felt like to rest without guilt? To trust without proof? To breathe without bracing? Surrender is the return to that original state, the one you knew as a child, before the world taught you fear, control, and conditional worth. It is the sacred coming home to the you that is not tangled in outcomes. The you that knows you are loved, not because of what you do, but because of who you are, who you've always been. Not the performer, not the fixer, not the one holding all the pieces together, but the soul, the still point, the light behind the thoughts. And in that remembering, healing becomes possible. Not because you fought your way there, but because you stopped blocking the healing that was trying to reach you. Everything you're looking for already wants to reach you, but it cannot pass through the gates of fear. You must unlock the door with surrender. Surrender your timeline. Surrender your need for validation. Surrender your tight grip on what healing should look like. And instead, listen. Let the silence teach you. Let the grief soften you. Let the stillness rebuild you. There is a wisdom that arrives only in the absence of effort, a kind of divine intelligence that you do not create but commune with. It cannot be summoned. It can only be received. And surrender is the posture of receiving. You bow inward, not in defeat, but in reverence. You say, I don't know how this will unfold, but I trust that I am being led. You say, I release my story of suffering, and I welcome the miracle in its place. You say, I am not afraid to let go, because what is truly mine will never require force to remain. That is the voice of the awakened one. That is the language of surrender. It is in this surrender that you become available to the present, because only in this moment, not the one you're imagining, not the one you're trying to fix, but this one is where love lives, is where healing breathes, is where miracles wait patiently for you to finally notice them. We miss the sacred so often, not because it isn't there, but because we are too busy controlling what's next to feel what's here. You were not designed to bear the burden of every outcome. You were not wired to micromanage the cosmos. That's not your job, that's God's. Your job is to be a willing vessel, a clear conduit, an open window for light, and light can't pass through when the blinds of fear are drawn shut. You must open, you must allow. And when you do, when you surrender your need to know, to control, to manipulate, the universe begins to move through you. Ideas arise, synchronicities unfold, people appear, doors open, but not because you forced it, because you became available to the rhythm of your soul. And what is your soul's rhythm? It is ease, it is grace, it is peace, it is love. It is the quiet knowing that you are not behind, not broken, not late, but right on time, right on path, right where you need to be. There is no place to get to, only a presence to return to. And surrender is that return. The mind may resist this. It has been trained to believe that pressure creates progress, that the tighter you grip, the more you'll control. But pressure is not presence, and gripping only creates more fear. Let go. Let the leaves fall. Let the river run. Let the mystery remain a mystery, and learn to enjoy the ride instead of fearing it. You do not need to have it all figured out. You only need to be aligned with your truth. And your truth is never rooted in fear. It is rooted in love. It is rooted in trust. It is rooted in the wisdom that says, even if I don't know where I'm going, I trust the one who guides me. This is the path of surrender. It is not always easy, but it is always worth it, because it will give you something the world cannot. Peace without proof, joy without condition, freedom without permission. And that, beloved, is power. You see, the art of surrender is not about erasing your will. It's about aligning your will with something higher. It's about learning to listen not just with your ears, but with your whole being. Because when you're fully present, when you're not lost in the anxious rehearsal of tomorrow or the painful replay of yesterday, something miraculous begins to occur. You start to hear the voice of your own soul. And your soul is always guiding you toward peace. But peace doesn't come from getting everything right. Peace is the byproduct of remembering that you were never wrong to begin with, that you've always been loved, that the real you, the one beneath the masks, beneath the fear, beneath the striving, has always been whole. Surrender doesn't make you less. It brings you back to the you that isn't built on conditions. The you that existed before the world told you who you had to be, before you learned to pretend, before you began bargaining for love through perfection, performance, or people-pleasing. Surrender returns you to your essence. And your essence was never separate from God. This is the mystical truth that so many miss in their quest to succeed, to heal, to transform, that you are not some broken thing that needs to be endlessly fixed. You are already divine, already worthy, already connected. The only thing in the way is your resistance to believing it. And that resistance, that constant inner battle, is what surrender seeks to dissolve. It is not a giving up of who you are. It is a letting go of who you are not. You are not your past. You are not your failures. You are not your regrets, your roles, or your wounds. You are not your name. You are not your story. You are the one who is aware of all of those things, yet untouched by any of them. The witness, the presence, the eternal one, behind the ever-changing forms. And when you live from this place, this surrendered awareness, life begins to mirror back to you a kind of grace that you once thought only belonged to saints or sages. You realize you don't need to chase miracles. Your very presence becomes a miracle. Because what is more miraculous than a human being who has laid down their weapons, the weapon of judgment, the weapon of fear, the weapon of shame, and chosen to walk with open hands and an open heart? What is more radiant than a person who trusts life deeply even when it's unclear? This kind of trust is not blind, it is not naive, it is born of intimacy. Intimacy with the self, with spirit, with the patterns that unfold when we stop interfering and start participating. There's a rhythm to grace, and when you surrender, you move with that rhythm, not against it. You speak with less urgency and more clarity. You love with less attachment and more freedom. You live with less fear and more awe. And awe is the natural result of surrender. Because the more you release the illusion of control, the more space there is for wonder, the more room there is for mystery. And the more mystery you allow, the more you begin to recognize that you are not alone in this, that something is moving through you, guiding, shaping, orchestrating. That something does not speak in demands. It speaks in whispers. And you must be still to hear it. Stillness is not inactivity. Stillness is receptivity. It is the spiritual posture of surrender. And in that posture, you don't lose your power, you magnify it. Because true power has nothing to prove. It does not dominate, it does not strive, it does not fear the unknown. True power rests in trust. It walks gently, it acts clearly, it speaks only when needed. And sometimes true power is silent, not because it has nothing to say, but because it knows that presence says more than words ever could. Let yourself be present. Let yourself be emptied. Let yourself become a vessel again. There's a sacred spaciousness that opens when you surrender your agenda and allow life to surprise you. You start to see with new eyes. You begin to experience every moment not as something to be controlled, but as something to be cherished. Even the difficult ones, even the painful ones, because you come to realize that every moment is part of the curriculum. Every detour is part of the path. Every loss is a hidden invitation to return to love. And love, not fear, is the ground of your being. When you surrender, you return to that ground. You let life soften you. You let it stretch you. You let it strip away everything that is not essential, not true, not real, until all that remains is what cannot be lost. And what cannot be lost is what you are. You are not the one drowning. You are the ocean itself. You are not the one falling. You are the sky that holds the fall. You are not the one struggling. You are the silence beneath the struggle, watching, waiting, loving, always. This remembrance is the fruit of surrender. And like all true spiritual fruits, it cannot be rushed. It ripens in its own time. So be patient with your process. Be gentle with your becoming. You are not late. You are not behind. You are not failing. You are being refined. And surrender is the fire that purifies, not by burning you down, but by burning away what you are not. What's left is gold. What's left is truth. What's left is peace, not because everything makes sense, but because you've made peace with not needing it to. That is power. And it was never about winning. It was about awakening. The awakened heart no longer needs to control the waves. It learns to move with them. It learns to bow to the rhythm of life, not in fear, but in reverence, not in resignation, but in freedom. When you surrender, you do not disappear, you finally appear, because everything you were pretending to be falls away. And the real you, the eternal you, the radiant, divine spark that has never been stained by trauma, shame, or fear, steps forward. That is the power of surrender. You are not diminished by letting go. You are revealed. You are not weakened by yielding. You are liberated. You are not erased. You are remembered. And so breathe now, deeply. Breathe like someone who no longer has to figure it all out. Breathe like someone who belongs to something sacred. Breathe like someone who trusts the tide to carry what needs to be carried and trusts the shore to receive what is meant to remain. Let the armor fall. Let the story unravel. Let the old identity dissolve into silence. You are not here to maintain the facade. You are here to wake up from it. Surrender is not defeat. Surrender is the sacred choice to stop worshiping fear. It is the decision to stop playing small. It is the moment you say, I will no longer grip what wants to go. I will no longer chase what is not mine. I will no longer demand that life rearrange itself for my comfort. I will instead rearrange myself for truth. That is power. The kind of power that doesn't need to shout. The kind of power that doesn't fear change. The kind of power that walks into the unknown with steady eyes and a steady heart, because it knows that even in the dark, you are never alone. You have always been carried. Even in the silence, you are being guided. Even in the waiting, you were being reshaped. Even in the loss, you are being prepared for more than you knew. And now, you remember. You remember what it means to surrender, not because you're broken, but because you're brave enough to stop pretending you were ever in control. You are no longer afraid to kneel at the altar of this moment. No longer afraid to let the past go where it belongs behind you. No longer afraid to trust what you cannot yet see, because the invisible has always been the most real. Surrender is not the end of your story. It is the beginning of your return to presence, to simplicity, to stillness, to love, to the part of you that doesn't need to impress, to win, to prove only to be. And what could be more powerful than that? To be here, to be aware, to be open, to be free. That is the path of surrender. It is the way of the mystic, the way of the healer, the way of the heart. It is the way of those who no longer wish to live by force, but by faith. So walk gently now. You don't need to fix the future, just feel the now. You don't need to explain your journey, just embody your truth. You don't need to hold the whole world together, just return to the wholeness that is holding you. Right here, right now, everything is unfolding. Everything is being rearranged in your favor. And your only task is this: to let go of what was never yours and trust what has always been. The love, the presence, the breath, the peace, that is the gift. That is the offering. That is your power. Surrender to it and become it. There's a weight that no hand can measure and no scale can define. It does not rest on your shoulders, but you feel it pressing down. It does not bind your ankles, yet it keeps you from rising. And it is this weight, invisible, yet undeniable, that keeps so many of us from taking the flight into peace, into purpose, into freedom. It is the weight of what we refuse to release. The stories we rehearse, the wounds we keep fresh, the guilt we cradle like a memory we believe we must protect. And though we long to soar, we stay grounded because we've convinced ourselves that to let go is to forget, but forgetting is not the way forward. Releasing is. You cannot take flight while dragging yesterday behind you like a rusted anchor. You cannot rise into the light of your divine essence while gripping the shadows of resentment. The soul was not designed for heaviness. The soul was made to move like wind through skylight, spacious, free, but ego convinces us that our identity depends on the weight we carry, that our suffering is who we are, that our hurt makes us real. And so we hold on, we grip tightly to the pain, thinking it gives us meaning. But I ask you now, what has pain truly given you besides more of itself? You were not born into this world to suffer endlessly under the burden of your past. You were not sent here by Source to collect wounds like medals and wear your trauma like a crown of proof. You were born to remember that you are already whole, already enough, already free. But you cannot awaken to that truth if your hands are full of what no longer serves you. Flight requires emptiness. Not emptiness in the sense of lack, but the kind of emptiness that is sacred, the emptiness of surrender, of openness, of trust. Birds do not rise by adding more weight to their wings. They rise because they were never meant to carry anything but the wind. And you, dear soul, were never meant to carry all that you're holding. Let go, not because it erases the past, but because the past was never meant to be your prison. Let go of who they said you were. Let go of what didn't happen the way you hoped. Let go of the apology that never came. Let go of the outcome you never received. Let go of the belief that you are broken. You are not broken. You are burdened, and there's a great difference. A bird with a stone in its beak is not incapable of flight. It simply needs to drop what it's holding. And the most powerful act you can perform in this lifetime is to unclench your spiritual fists and release what you've clung to for far too long. We live in a world that glorifies accumulation of things, of titles, of experiences, but also of wounds, of grievances, of stories. But your path to peace is subtraction, not addition. Every spiritual master, every awakened soul, every truly liberated being will tell you it's not what you gain that sets you free, it's what you release. The Buddha did not awaken by becoming more. He awakened by becoming less identified with form, with desire, with self. What are you willing to become less of so that you can become more of what you truly are? Are you willing to be less right so you can be more peaceful? Are you willing to be less certain so you can be more trusting? Are you willing to be less attached so you can be more free? Because to fly, you must let the heaviness fall away. And the heaviest thing you carry is the belief that you must carry it. There is a sacred law of the universe that is always at work. The more you resist letting go, the more you attract situations that force you to. Because your soul knows what your ego denies that your healing is in the release. That freedom is not granted by anything outside you. It is unveiled when you unbind yourself from within. So many people pray for peace but refuse to put down the sword. So many seek happiness while holding on to what hurts. But you cannot have both. You cannot live in the light and feed the shadows. You cannot ascend while gripping the ground, and you cannot evolve while protecting your pain. You have a choice. And this moment, this very breath, is the threshold. You can continue to identify with your wounds. You can keep rehearsing the stories of what they did, what you lost, what didn't go your way. Or you can stop. You can take a holy pause, and you can say to yourself, I've carried this long enough. I don't need this to be me anymore. This is not denial. This is liberation. Forgiveness is not weakness. It is wisdom. Releasing is not passive. It is powerful. It is not forgetting the past. It is understanding that your past does not have the authority to define your future unless you keep giving it the microphone. You came here to transcend, to transmute, to rise beyond, not to escape life, but to remember who you are within it. And you are not the hurt you experienced. You are the awareness that held it. You are not the betrayal. You are the witness. You are not the grief. You are the vast presence in which that grief arose and passed. You are not the weight. You are the sky. And nothing that happened in your story is heavy enough to keep you from remembering your true nature unless you decide it is. Take a moment now, not with your mind, but with your heart. Ask yourself quietly, what have I made heavier than it needs to be? What story are you still living inside of that no longer matches your vision of peace? What label, what memory, what name or identity have you fused with your sense of self, and does it still serve your highest path? If it doesn't, let it go. If it hurts, bless it and let it go. If it stirs up anger, acknowledge it and let it go. If it makes you feel like less than the infinite soul you are, breathe deeply and let it go. No one will do this for you. This is your sacred responsibility. No one else is inside your consciousness with a broom, sweeping out the resentment, the doubt, the guilt. Only you can do that. And you do it not because others deserve it, but because you do. You deserve peace. You deserve to wake up unburdened. You deserve to feel light. And flight, true spiritual flight, is what happens when the soul remembers that its natural state is freedom. You are not your wounds. You are not your fears. You are not the broken dreams or the roads that didn't lead where you hoped. You are the one who has survived it all and now stands at the edge of a new becoming. But you can't take off until you release what weighs you down. The caterpillar must surrender the ground before it becomes the butterfly. The leaf must release the tree to dance with the wind. And the soul must release the ego's grip to remember it was never confined to begin with. Release is the sacred act of trust. It is saying to the universe, I no longer choose to carry what you never asked me to hold. You don't heal by holding tighter. You heal by surrendering. And as you surrender, a miracle occurs. The heart begins to lighten, the breath deepens, the mind softens, the world looks less threatening, love finds you more easily, joy visits more often. And suddenly, the life you were meant to live is no longer on hold because you stop carrying the delay disguised as pain. You are not behind. You are not late. You are exactly where you need to be to remember the sky has always been waiting for you to rise. So often we say we want to be free, but what we really mean is we want to be free on our terms. We want to let go, but only if we know what will come next. We want to trust, but only if we can control the outcome. And this is where most souls stall. Not because life isn't offering us wings, but because we're still trying to fly while dragging the ground behind us. But let me ask you this. Has clinging ever brought you peace? Has gripping ever led to grace? Or have you noticed that every time you let go, really let go, the next step appeared more clearly, the burden grew lighter, and something inside you finally exhaled? The irony of the spiritual path is that we do not grow by adding more. We grow by shedding what was never us to begin with. Not one layer of pain was your true self. Not one scar defined you. Not one fearful thought ever spoke with the voice of your soul. And yet, we identify with them because we've forgotten the art of being rather than becoming. We think we must become something extraordinary. But the soul is already extraordinary. The only task is to remove what clouds that remembrance, like a sculptor chipping away at marble to reveal the figure within your journey. Is not about chasing something new. It's about uncovering what has always been there. Your divine essence, and this essence is weightless. You do not need to fix yourself. You only need to free yourself. You don't need to gather more knowledge. You need to unlearn the lies. You don't need to become powerful. You already are. You simply need to drop the thoughts, the judgments, the traumas, and the identities that told you otherwise. The ego says, you must be more. The soul whispers, you already are. And when you listen closely, you will hear that whisper underneath every heartbeat, every breath, every still moment where you're not trying to be anything, you are simply present. In that moment, you are flying. Because flight is not a destination, it is a state of being. It is alignment with who you truly are, beneath the noise. Now, you may ask, how do I begin to let go? You begin by notice when a thought carries heaviness. Notice when a memory returns not to heal you, but to punish you. Notice when a belief makes your chest tight or your energy dim. That is not truth. That is ego disguised as memory. And you have the power right here, right now, to witness it, thank it for its role, and release it like a bird from the cage of your mind. This is not a one-time act. It is a sacred practice. Every day, you must ask yourself, does this thought serve my flight? Does this feeling expand me or bind me? Is this belief lifting me or holding me down? If it is not helping you soar, It is not coming from your highest self. Release it. You don't need it. And in its place, choose a lighter thought, a loving thought, a truer thought. Choose gratitude over grievance. Choose faith over fear. Choose now over then. And choose to see every single moment of your life, even the painful ones, as teachers rather than burdens. Because when you shift your perception, what once weighed you down becomes the very force that lifts you. Do you see the paradox? What was once pain becomes purpose. What was once failure becomes foundation. What was once sorrow becomes spaciousness. But only when you stop resisting, only when you stop identifying with it as you. And in that sacred shift, the alchemy of awakening your soul begins to remember you were never the wound. You were always the healer. You were never the broken piece. You were always the whole. You were never the story. You were always the silent awareness in which the story unfolded. And you were never meant to carry it all. That was never your purpose. So ask yourself now, what is the weight I've been carrying that I no longer wish to bring into tomorrow? Perhaps it's the weight of comparison, the belief that you must measure your worth against others, that if someone else succeeds, you've somehow failed, that your path must look like theirs to be valid. But the truth is, no two souls have the same sky to fly in. You have your own direction, your own design, your own sacred winds. And when you stop comparing your flight to someone else's, you begin to soar in your own unique rhythm. Or perhaps it's the weight of shame, the echo of past choices you no longer align with. But hear this with all your heart. You are not your past. You are the awareness that learned from it. Guilt serves no one when it becomes a home. Let it be a guide, not a jail. Take the lesson, release the judgment, and free yourself. The soul does not evolve by condemning itself. It evolves by choosing love again and again. Maybe the weight you carry is anger that hot, consuming fire that promises strength but only burns the vessel that holds it. Anger often masks grief, and grief is love with nowhere to go. Let it go. Not for them, for you. Because you were not born to be consumed by flames. You were born to be illuminated by light. Or perhaps it's the weight of the unknown, the fear of what you can't control, can't see, can't predict. But my friend, life was never meant to be controlled. It was meant to be trusted. Faith is the wings, uncertainty is the sky, and trust is the wind beneath it all. When you stop needing to know where you're going, you finally arrive in the now, and the now is the only place you ever truly had to be. So much of what we carry isn't ours to hold. We carry expectations we never agreed to, roles we never wanted, pain passed down through generations. But just because it's been handed to you does not mean you have to carry it forward. The chain ends when you say it does. The pattern dissolves when you choose to wake up. And waking up isn't always dramatic. Sometimes it's simply a moment of quiet clarity when you sit alone with your breath and realize, I'm done carrying what doesn't feel like love. That's the moment the flight begins. And once you taste it, even once, you will never forget what it feels like to be free. There is something miraculous that happens when you no longer resist the falling away, when you no longer mourn what is leaving, but bless it on its way. In that holy space, you are not losing, you are remembering. You are not being emptied, you are being refined. The acorn must crack for the oak to emerge. The shell must break for the light to pour in. And yes, it feels like loss, but in truth, it is birth. The death of who you are not is the beginning of who you've always been. Do not grieve what you release. It was never yours to keep. You are not here to hoard old identities. You are here to embody truth. And truth is light. Truth is weightless. Truth needs no defense, no protection, no mask. The most powerful thing you can do in a world obsessed with appearance is to become weightless. to become real, to say, I don't need to hold this story anymore. I don't need to defend this pain. I don't need to explain why I'm healing. I only need to return to peace. Because peace does not argue. Peace does not beg. Peace does not carry a ledger of wrongs. It does not keep score. Peace simply is. And when you stop trying to earn it, when you stop believing it must be deserved, you realize peace is your natural state. You were never without it. You were only distracted. The distractions came in many forms. The noise of comparison, the addiction to busyness, the need to be seen, the compulsion to be understood. But peace never left you. It was waiting quietly underneath the rubble of all that trying. Flight is not about rising above others. It is about rising above the noise, the inner dialogue that says, you're not enough, you haven't done enough, you don't deserve rest. That voice is not the voice of God. That is the voice of conditioning. And the moment you stop identifying with it, you begin to fly. Because flight isn't about escaping life, it's about engaging life from a higher vantage point. When a bird soars above the storm, it's not avoiding the sky, it's simply rising to where the storm no longer reaches. And so must you. There will always be chaos on the ground, always some drama, some fear, some grievance pulling at your feet. But you are not your feet, you are your wings. And your wings are made of faith, of surrender, of the deep knowing that you are carried by something greater than circumstance. What is this something greater? Call it what you will. God, source, the Tao, divine intelligence. The name matters less than the experience of it. And the experience of it is this: peace without reason, joy without cause, love without condition. When you rest in that space, you will realize nothing was ever missing. You just couldn't feel it through the weight you were carrying. Release is the doorway to the divine. You do not need to beg the universe for peace. You need only make space for it. Peace does not need to be created. It only needs to be uncovered. Imagine your soul as a radiant sun always shining. The clouds of resentment, fear, guilt, and control only obscure it, never extinguish it. The work is not to chase light. The work is to dissolve clouds. And how do you dissolve a cloud? Not with force, not with war, with awareness. Awareness is the great dissolver. When you see clearly what you've been carrying without judgment, without shame, the weight begins to lift. So take a breath now and simply ask, what am I ready to see? What truth have I avoided? Because I feared what it would ask me to release. Perhaps it's the truth that your identity is not in your trauma. Perhaps it's the truth that your worth is not defined by your productivity. Perhaps it's the truth that your pain has been a teacher, not a punishment. Or perhaps it's the truth that you're allowed to let go, even if no one else says sorry. There are no prerequisites to freedom. There is only your decision, your inner yes. And the moment you say yes to release, the sky opens, the burdens loosen, and your wings begin to stretch again. But the ego will not go quietly. It will tell you, if you let go, you'll be exposed. If you release control, you'll fall. If you forgive, you'll be weak. None of that is true. It is the ego that fears the sky because it cannot survive in openness. The ego feeds on structure, on story, on certainty. But the soul is water. The soul is wind. The soul is light. It cannot be contained. And when you live from soul, you do not need to know. You only need to be. There is an ancient wisdom that lives inside you, a compass that doesn't use logic but resonance. You feel it when you are near truth. You feel it when you are near joy. You feel it when something heavy suddenly feels light, and you know this is the path. Follow that. That is your wings speaking, and they will never lead you astray. But you must be willing to silence the noise, to step away from the collective panic, the chronic comparison, the constant mental commentary. You must dare to pause, to breathe, to listen inwardly, because in that space, the divine speaks, not with thunder, but with stillness, not with answers, but with presence. And that presence is what lifts you. You are not waiting for the sky to open. You are remembering that you are already in it. The weight you've been carrying is not keeping you grounded. It's keeping you distracted from the fact that you are already soaring. You just haven't opened your eyes to it. The more you release, the clearer you see, the lighter you become, and the more you begin to trust not the future, not the outcome, but yourself, your soul, your center. This is the liberation the saints spoke of. The freedom the mystics danced in, the peace the sages pointed to when they said, "Be still and know." Know what? Know that you are already home. Know that the wings were never outside of you. Know that everything you've ever sought is not in the distance, it is within. But it cannot be felt while carrying weight that was never meant to be yours. So lay it down, beloved soul. Lay down the proving. Lay down the defending. Lay down the striving. Lay down the waiting for permission. You are allowed to be light. You are allowed to be free. You are allowed to fly, not someday, not when it all makes sense, not when they apologize, but now. Now is your moment. Now is your portal. Now is the beginning of the rest of your flight. When the soul begins to remember its weightlessness, a quiet revolution takes place. Not in the external world, but in the inner kingdom. This is the true uprising, not against others, not against life, but against the false self you've been conditioned to carry. This uprising is not loud. It doesn't shout. It doesn't need applause. It simply refuses to carry what is no longer aligned with light. And in this refusal, a powerful truth emerges. You are not here to hold on. You are here to flow through. You are not a container for pain. You are a vessel for presence. And presence is too sacred to be filled with what is no longer real. So if it no longer feels like love, it no longer belongs in your hands. If it no longer resonates with peace, it no longer belongs in your heart. And if it no longer brings you closer to truth, it no longer belongs in your mind. You came to this earth not to collect, but to remember. And memory, true memory, is not about the past. It is about your origin, the divine essence that preceded all experience, all trauma, all identity. The light you were before the name, before the wound, before the story. That light has never been dimmed, only buried. And every act of letting go is an excavation, a return, a resurrection. The ego will call it loss, but the soul knows better. The soul calls it rebirth. Yes, rebirth. You will be reborn many times in this life, not just once. And each rebirth will cost you the version of yourself you thought you had to be. Each flight will ask you to shed another layer, to drop another burden, to trust more deeply than before. This is not regression, this is expansion. Every shedding is sacred. You shed illusions, you shed attachments, you shed roles you never truly agreed to, and one by one you return to the center of who you are, vast, open, free. And when you return there, the world begins to look different. You no longer react, you respond. You no longer perform, you presence. You no longer grasp, you allow. You no longer ask, how do I control this? But instead, what is this here to teach me? This is what it means to live from soul. And soul does not carry the past like a wound. It carries only the present like a flame. In that flame, everything that is false will burn away, and that is the grace of it. You are not being punished, you are being purified. All that is being asked of you is this: stop carrying what you don't want to become. If you hold resentment, you become it. If you carry fear, it becomes your lens. If you grip the past, it becomes your prison. But if you hold truth, you become peace. If you carry stillness, you become presence. If you walk in surrender, you become weightless. And when you become weightless, you don't even have to try to fly. You simply rise, like a feather no longer pinned down by ego, like a breath finally released into the world, like a soul no longer apologizing for its light. This is your destiny, not to strive, not to suffer, but to rise. And this rising cannot be done from effort alone. It must be done from trust. Trust that life is not working against you, it is working through you. That every detour was a redirection, that every heartbreak was a doorway, that every ending was a sacred invitation to begin again lighter this time. Have you noticed how nature never clings? The trees release their leaves without asking when the new ones will come. The river flows forward, never backward, never doubting its direction. The sun does not mourn the night, it simply returns again and again. And yet, we, the most conscious of creation, resist this natural rhythm. We hold on to last season's leaves. We grip the banks of the past. We beg the night not to fall. But healing is in the rhythm, and peace is in the release. So stop trying to force stillness through control. Allow it through surrender. Stop demanding that life obey your timeline. Let it unfold according to the greater wisdom that forms stars and births galaxies. That same wisdom is guiding your unfolding. You don't need to rush. You don't need to fight. You don't need to earn your flight. You only need to step out of the illusion that you were ever grounded to begin with. Your spirit was never bound. It was only your identification with the binding that made you feel stuck. It is not your job to carry every lesson forever. Some lessons are meant to be learned and then released. Some pains are meant to be felt and then transmuted. And some experiences are meant to pass through you, not stay inside you. Release is not rejection. It is integration. You take the wisdom. You leave the wound. You take the growth. You leave the guilt. You take the lesson. You leave the label. You are not who you were when the pain happened. You are who you became after it. And the more you release the story, the more you can honor the strength it gave you without needing to keep reliving the scene. You cannot write a new chapter while rereading the old one. And you cannot fly into your future while defending the architecture of your past. So breathe now. Breathe and ask your soul, what am I defending that I no longer even believe in? Because that is where the heaviest weights hide in old beliefs you don't even resonate with anymore. Beliefs like, I must be perfect. I'm not worthy unless I achieve. I'm only lovable if I'm needed. I can't rest until I've proven something. These beliefs are not you. They are inherited, adopted, programmed. And they are optional. Choose again. Choose freedom over form. Choose essence over expectation. Choose truth over tradition. You do not owe anyone the version of you that you've outgrown. Your only allegiance is to your becoming. And becoming requires lightness. Becoming requires courage. Becoming requires space. And above all, becoming requires letting go. There is nothing left to prove. No weight left worth carrying. You have already survived what was meant to break you. You are here, and you are free to choose peace, not someday, but now. So put it all down. The apology that never came, the identity that no longer fits, the guilt that was never yours, the grief you've already honored, the expectations that exhaust you, the fear that says you're not ready. Let it all fall. Because the moment you stop gripping the past, the future no longer frightens you. And the moment you stop defending the pain, healing finds you without effort. You don't need to chase purpose. You are purpose. Once you stop covering it up with everything you think you must be, the sky does not explain itself to the ground. It just opens wide, blue, boundless, so must you. Your lightness is your truth. Your peace is your power. And your freedom is already here beneath the weight you are finally willing to release. So rise, you're ready. Let go and fly.